You ever had a person that just runs over you and hurts you and stabs you in the back and talk about you or whatever the case may be over and over and over and over again? And have you ever made this statement here? I'm not going to let you run over me again, or I'm tired of letting you run over me again, or I'm not going to forgive you anymore. I've been asked this question a lot of times. How many times do you have to let a person run over you before you stop forgiving them, before you stop letting them run over you? And let me tell you something. I honestly think that that's a bad way to look at it. When you say, how many times do I have to let a person run over me? Let me tell you something. Jesus didn't let anybody run over him. Jesus was mistreated worse than you and I probably will ever be mistreated. But I don't think that he was letting somebody run over him. I think he was letting God work through him. You see, it's a difference in letting someone run over you and then letting God work through you. Okay? But just to answer the question, how many times do you let a person hurt you before you stop forgiving them? And here's the answer. It's a simple answer too. You forgive everybody, no matter how many times they hurt you, until the day you die. The day you have your last breath in your body is the day you never have to worry about forgiving anybody. You say, what? That's hard. Well, I know it's hard. And we're not the first ones who had a problem with that. In Matthew chapter 18, beginning with verse 21, all the way down through the end of the chapter, Peter, the apostle Peter, who spent every day with Jesus, had the same problem. He came to Jesus, and this was immediately after Jesus talked about conflict between two people and how that conflict should be worked out. Peter said, Lord, how many times does my brother have to sin against me and I forgive him? Peter was basically saying, look, there's got to be some limitation to my forgiveness. What is it, Jesus? And so Peter offered the number 7. Peter said, 7 times? And Jesus' response to him was, I do not say 7, but 70 times 7, which is 490, if my math skills are still decent. I don't think Jesus was setting a literal number. I think Jesus was showing through exaggeration of how small-minded Peter's response was. He was basically saying, Peter, you say 7 times? No, I say 490 times. And he was showing through exaggeration that there is no limit to forgiveness. Because you know what? Even if 490 was a literal number, we won't use that up before we die. We probably won't even make it to 100 when it comes to forgiving people. Jesus was saying, I don't care how many times someone hurts you, you forgive them. Why? Because your before I get to that point, you may say, well, what if they don't ask for forgiveness? What if they don't say, I'm sorry? It ain't. Your forgiveness has nothing to do with them. Your forgiveness has something to do with you and your peace with God. Too many times we hold bitterness and angerness inside our hearts. We don't get any rest. We don't have any peace. We don't find any kind of consolation because we're downtrodden, we're saddened, we're upset, we're frustrated, all because we're holding in bitterness toward people. Forgiveness allows you to release all of that bitterness in your heart that you have toward people and allows you to have peace with God. Forgiveness is not based upon what somebody else does. Forgiveness is the attitude that you have. Does it mean you ever forget it? No. Forgiveness does not equate forgetting something. The only way you can forget things in life, you got to cut your brain out. Forgiveness means, though, that you won't bring those things up and use those things as hammers to beat people across the head with. Now, let me give you a couple examples. Jesus was hanging on the cross. Those people were crucifying Jesus. None of them said, I'm sorry. None of them said, Jesus, forgive me. None of them said, Jesus, I hate this happened. Yet, while he was dying, Jesus says, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. You see, Jesus' forgiveness was not based upon their actions, but it was based upon his best interest for them and his relationship with his Father. One more example. A man by the name of Stephen in Acts chapter 7. He was preaching to some people who didn't like what he was saying. So they picked up rocks and began to throw the rocks at him. He began to die. And as he was dying in Acts chapter 7, the last part of that chapter down around verse 50, Stephen looked up to heaven. While he was dying, looked up to heaven, saw Jesus standing on the right hand of God. And while he was taking his last breath, he said, Father, do not hold this charge against him, against these people. Now, they didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't say I was sorry. They didn't say, I hate this happened, Stephen. No, Stephen's forgiveness was based upon his relationship with God and what he wanted for those people's best interests. And I'm telling you, if you want peace in your life, if you want to get rid of the bitterness in your own heart, then you have got to forgive people who do you wrong, and your forgiveness must be based upon your relationship with God and how you want to live as a child of God, not based upon how they want to live. You see, you cannot control the way people act, but you can control how you respond. Romans chapter 12, I think verse 18, says, as much as lies in you, live peaceably with all men. You know what that means? That means people are going to be people. People are going to act the way they want to act. And you can't control that. But you can control your response to the way they act. And I'm going to close it out with this last verse. This is the last verse of Matthew chapter 15 and maybe verse 38. But in that verse, Jesus says, if you want your Father in heaven to forgive you, then you better forgive others. Because without us forgiving others, how in the world can we expect God to forgive us for the disappointing life that we live to him sometimes? Peace out. Y'all have a good day.